The phone felt heavier than my frail hands could carry. My breath rattled in my chest as I pressed the green button, my thumb trembling against the glass. "Daniel?" My voice cracked, thin as paper. "I just want to see you one last time." Silence. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. Then came the sound I dreaded most. Click. A sharp, merciless end. I stared at the screen, his name still glowing there as if mocking me. Daniel, my firstborn, the boy I once carried through fevers, the man I believed would never let me die alone. I swallowed hard, fighting the lump in my throat, and tried again. My fingers slid down the contact list, landing on Rachel. The ringtone buzzed in my ear, each note like a hammer on my ribs. She picked up. "Rachel," I whispered, "please, your mother is dying." A short laugh. Cold. "Mom, I'm busy. Don't be dramatic." And then, the line went dead. The room spun. I gripped the bedsheet with fingers gone white, searching for air that refused to fill my lungs. One more name glowed on the screen. Michael. My youngest. My baby. Surely he would come. Surely. The ringing stretched forever. I closed my eyes and saw him as a little boy, running barefoot through the kitchen, calling me Mama, with chocolate smeared across his cheeks. Finally, a voice. "Mom, I can't talk now. We'll figure something out later." Later? My lips trembled. "Michael, I don't have later." But all I heard was a sigh, and then the silence of abandonment. The phone slipped from my hand, landing on the tile floor with a dull thud. The monitor beside me beeped faster, each pulse a nail driven deeper into my chest. I looked at the screen, lighting up against the floor. 3 names. 3 children. Not one of them here. The room reeked of disinfectant, sharp and bitter. The fluorescent lights hummed above, pouring down their pale indifference. My body ached. But it was nothing compared to the weight pressing on my heart. How did it come to this? I raised a trembling hand to wipe the sweat from my forehead, and it came away wet. Not just with sweat, but with tears I hadn't realized had fallen. For 78 years, I had carried this family. I had bled, worked, sacrificed until my bones screamed. Every dollar, every heartbeat, every piece of myself. I had given it to them. And now, in the one moment I asked for something back, they gave me nothing. Not even their presence. I closed my eyes. The room was quiet except for the steady beep, beep, beep of the monitor. It sounded less like a heartbeat and more like a countdown. A countdown to the end. And the cruelest truth of all echoed in my skull, sharper than any scalpel. How does a mother who raised 3 children with blood and tears end up dying alone? The ring on my finger is scratched and faded now. Once, it gleamed under the church lights on my wedding day, a promise of forever. I twist it absent-mindedly as I lie in this bed, and the metal bites into my thin skin. That ring has outlived my marriage, outlived my husband's love, and perhaps it will outlive me. It pulls me back to another time, when I was still strong, still carrying 3 small children on my back with nothing but grit and borrowed hope. I am Smargaret Wilson, 78 years old. And for 35 years, I worked 3 jobs to keep my children fed, clothed, and educated. Night shifts as a nurse, where the scent of antiseptic clung to me like a second skin. Early mornings scrubbing floors and offices, bleach burning my hands raw. Afternoons behind the counter of a corner store, smiling at strangers while my feet swelled inside cheap shoes. I used to count my life not in years, but in bills. Each December 1985, 85 for electricity. The bill spotted with rain as I stuffed it into a plastic sleeve. A March 1992, $1,200 for Daniel's first semester of college. Money scraped together by pawning my mother's necklace. By the time all 3 finished their schooling, I had poured over $20,000 into tuition fees alone. 3 mortgages. 3 houses mortgaged, sold, or refinanced. Every signature I wrote felt like carving another piece out of my own flesh. And yet, I believed it was worth it. I remember Rachel at 13, her hair braided, her eyes lit with dreams. She once sat beside me on the creaking brown sofa, our only real piece of furniture then, and said, "One day, Mom, I'll buy you a house with a rose garden. A big one. You'll never have to work again." I smiled, too tired to speak, and believed her as faithfully as a child believes in fairy tales. The sofa is still here. Its fabric is frayed, smelling faintly of dust and old rain. Every time I lower myself onto it now, I feel the echo of that promise. Sweet once, bitter now. For years I told myself, sacrifice will bring love. Hardship will bring gratitude. But late at night, after 12 hours on my feet at the hospital, I sometimes wondered, was I trading my youth for a lie? I scolded myself for doubting. Mothers are not supposed to ask. Mothers are supposed to give. And so, I gave. Michael, the youngest, once came home with a failing grade. I stayed up with him through the night, drilling math problems while my eyes blurred from exhaustion. At dawn, he hugged me tight and whispered, "You're the best mom. I'll never forget this." He did forget. They all did. I should have noticed the signs sooner. The little cracks in their words. The way Rachel wrinkled her nose when she hugged me after a shift, saying, "Mom, you smell like bleach." The way Daniel, at 20, stopped thanking me for rent money and began demanding it. "It's just a couple hundred, Mom. You owe me that much." At first, I laughed it off, told myself it was youth, stress, carelessness. But those words planted seeds in me, tiny foreshadowings of the coldness that would one day bloom full. The ring on my finger catches the light again, and I realize it has become my reminder. Once a symbol of love, then a symbol of survival. Now, perhaps, a symbol of my foolishness. I whisper to myself, the same question I've carried for decades. Was I too naive to believe that sacrifice could buy love? TA. It was an ordinary morning, gray light filtering through the blinds when my phone rang. "Mom, transfer another 2,000. Quick." "I don't have time to explain." Michael's voice snapped, sharp and impatient, as if I were an employee failing at my job. The call lasted less than 30 seconds, but it felt like a hammer splitting my chest open. I sat at the kitchen table, the cracked laminate cool beneath my palm. The phone trembled in my hand before I placed it down, almost gently, as though setting down something poisonous. For a long moment, I just stared at it. My breath came shallow, my pulse loud in my ears. Then, slowly, I turned toward the old laptop perched on the counter. My fingers shook as I lifted the lid, the screen flickering to life. The cursor blinked, waiting for me, waiting for my decision. If I keep going, I will have nothing left. T. If I keep going, I won't even have a roof over my head to die under. Sigh. If I keep going, I will lose more than money. I will lose myself. Was I really just a wallet with a heartbeat? Was that all I had become to my own children? I moved the mouse, each motion heavy as though I were dragging a stone through water. The bank's website opened. The familiar numbers glared back at me, dwindling, drained by years of transfers. I scrolled to the automatic payments, the monthly lifeline I had set up for my children long ago. Daniel's account. Rachel's account. Michael's account. Each line was a vein bleeding me dry. My hand hovered over the cancel button. My throat tightened. For decades, my instinct had been to give, to sacrifice, to keep them afloat, even if it meant sinking myself. But something inside me snapped. I pressed. A small window popped up. "Are you sure?" Yes. I was sure. My fingers slammed the trackpad. One by one, the transfers vanished. The sound of finality wasn't loud, just a soft click from the mouse. But in my ears, it was thunder. I leaned back, chest heaving. My eyes darted toward the safe, tucked in the corner of the room. I rose, knees trembling, and walked to it. My hands found the cold steel, the dial smooth from years of use. I twisted the lock, opened it, and stared inside at the last of my savings, my papers, my ring. The only proof that I still belonged to myself. And then, with a breath as sharp as glass, I closed it. The door clanged shut, and when the lock clicked into place, stack, it sounded like a coffin lid sealing. I clutched the key in my palm until it cut into my skin. If I had not done this today, I knew the price. I would die with nothing. Not just penniless, but stripped of dignity, stripped of identity, reduced to a servant in my own life. That could not be my ending. I straightened, my breathing steadied, the tears on my cheeks dried to salt. My sentences inside my head shortened, hardened, like stones clicking into place. No more excuses, no more waiting. I whispered into the empty room, voice steady for the first time in years. I am no longer the shadow that serves in my own house. The living room felt different that afternoon. It was the same four walls, the same faded brown sofa sagging in the middle, the same lace curtains drooping by the window. But the air was poisoned. Papers lay on the coffee table, neatly stacked, waiting like traps. A pen rested on top, its silver body gleaming under the weak sunlight. My teacup rattled against its saucer as I tried to hold it steady. The sound was tiny, yet it echoed in the silence like a warning bell. Then the door swung open. Daniel first, his suit pressed sharp, his cologne thick. Rachel followed, clutching a leather folder to her chest. Their smiles were thin, rehearsed, sugar-dusted with venom. "Mom," Daniel began, lowering himself into the chair opposite me, "we're here to make things easier for you." Rachel slid the folder onto the table. "Yes, these are just some documents. If you sign, we'll handle everything. Bills, accounts, the house. You won't have to worry." I looked at the folder, then at them. My pulse pounded in my temples. "Easier?" My voice came out steady, though my hand tightened on the cup. "Or easier for you?" Daniel's smile twitched. He pushed the pen toward me. "Mom, don't be difficult. We're your children. We're trying to protect you." "Protect me," I repeated, staring into his eyes. "By stripping away everything I have left?" A beat of silence. Rachel crossed her legs, tapping her shoe against the floor. "You're not well, Mom. You can't handle things anymore. Let us take responsibility." Responsibility? I leaned forward, placing the cup down with a soft clink. "Or control?" Her face hardened. "Why do you always assume the worst?" Daniel's voice sharpened. "This is for your own good." I shook my head. "No, it's for your pockets." They shifted, restless. Rachel stood and moved toward the cabinet by the wall, tugging at the drawers. "What are you doing?" I demanded. She smiled without looking back. "Just checking for the paperwork you keep misplacing. You know, your bank statements." My chest tightened. I rose, shaky but firm, and stepped between her and the cabinet. My breath came fast, but my gaze did not waver. Not another inch. Rachel froze, startled by the steel in my tone. Daniel sighed heavily behind me. "Mom, don't be dramatic," he said. "We need access. Just sign. This way, you won't embarrass yourself in court later." Court. The words sliced through me. "You'd drag me into court?" My voice cracked, then steadied again. "Your own mother?" Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His voice lowered, oily and calm. "If it comes to that, yes, because you're not thinking clearly anymore." Something inside me snapped. The pen lay there on the folder, waiting for my hand. I picked it up. Their eyes lit with triumph. For a second, I let them believe it. Then I hurled it to the table. The metal clattered loud, bouncing, rolling off the edge and hitting the floor with a sharp ping-jang. Both of them flinched. I straightened, my breath ragged but my spine unbending. No more. My voice cut the air. Today, I stop being your victim. Daniel's jaw tightened. You don't mean that. I do. My hands still shook, but my words were clear. I am not your puppet to pull on strings. The room went silent, except for the ticking of the old wall clock. Each tick marked a line I would never cross again. Rachel's face flushed red. You'll regret this, Mom, she spat. You're making everything harder. Harder? I said softly, almost to myself. Nothing is harder than giving your life to children who turn you into prey. Daniel grabbed the folder, snapping it shut. Fine. We'll do it the hard way. Don't say we didn't warn you. They stormed toward the door, their footsteps pounding across the floorboards. The slam rattled the picture frames on the wall. When the echo died, I was alone again. My knees buckled, and I lowered myself back onto the sofa. My hands still trembled, my chest still ached, but somewhere inside, a new fire had been lit. The room was heavy with silence, but it was my silence. Mine. I whispered to no one, to everyone. From today on, I am no longer the shadow serving in my own house. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. A thick envelope stamped with the county seal slid under my door like a snake. My hands shook as I bent to pick it up. The paper was heavy, stiff with authority. Inside, black ink screamed at me. Summons to appear in court. Petition for guardianship due to diminished mental capacity. I read the words again and again until they blurred into a storm of black lines. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the sofa, the envelope still clutched in my hand. So this was their new weapon, the law. Not only had my children abandoned me, they were now trying to erase me, declaring me incapable of managing my own life. By the time the neighbors caught sight of me in the afternoon, whispers had already spread. In the grocery store, I heard two women mutter near the apples. Poor Margaret. I heard she's losing her mind. Their voices dropped, but not enough. They wanted me to hear. Shame burned my face. I pressed the envelope to my chest, as if by holding it tighter I could keep my identity from slipping through the cracks. Days later, my lawyer, young James Carter, all sharp suits and sharper eyes, spread a stack of documents across my kitchen table. They've submitted affidavits, he said, voice clipped. Statements from supposed witnesses. I scanned the pages. Names I barely knew. A shopkeeper swearing I had once forgotten to pay for groceries. A distant cousin insisting I repeated myself at family gatherings. Even a former neighbor claiming I left the stove on for hours. All lies. Look at the dates, James urged, tapping the paper. March 4, 2022. You were in the hospital for surgery that week. I have your records. Still, my stomach twisted. Lies written in ink can feel heavier than truth spoken aloud. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, the clock ticking loud, and wondered, if strangers believe them, will the court believe them too? The next morning, I opened my old notebook. Spine cracked, pages filled with tiny handwriting. I had kept it for years, recording every payment, every visit, every phone call. My defense, though I hadn't known it then. March 4, I whispered, flipping to the page. Paid hospital fee, $600. Stayed 3 nights. The proof was there, in my own hand. My voice from the past, saving me now. I stacked my evidence carefully, receipts tucked in plastic sleeves, utility bills smudged by rain, even a grainy camera clip from my porch showing the day and time I returned from the hospital. My truth, fragile but real. One evening, as I sat with the documents spread across my lap, a knock came at the door. It was Helen, my oldest friend, silver hair pinned neat, eyes fierce as ever. They're saying ugly things about you, she said bluntly, stepping inside. But I know better. I've known you 50 years. I tried to smile, but tears rose instead. She clasped my trembling hands in hers. Margaret, she said softly, You are not alone. Not while I still breathe. Her words pierced through the fog. For the first time in weeks, I felt a thread of strength tether me back to the world. Later, Mrs. Chen from next door brought over tea and biscuits, insisting I eat. Don't listen to gossip, she murmured. We know who you are. Those small kindnesses glowed like lanterns in my night. But the storm never ceased. One day James told me, their lawyer plans to argue that you're paranoid, that all this record-keeping is proof of obsession, not clarity. Paranoid. Obsessive. Broken. The words stung worse than knives. That night, I broke down. My safe place, my living room, felt like a courtroom already, every shadow whispering accusations. I pressed my palms over my ears, but I could still hear the imagined voices of the judge, the jury, my children. Then Helen arrived again the next morning, cheerful as sunlight. She placed a rose from her garden on my table and said, "See? Life still blooms. Don't let them convince you otherwise." I touched the soft petals, fragile yet defiant, and something inside me steadied. Still, the question haunted me, louder each day. What if the court believed them? What if strangers in black robes and solemn suits decided I was no longer fit to hold my own name, my own life? I lay awake, the ceiling blurring above me, and asked the darkness the question I could not silence. What if I lose not only my children, but also myself? I wasn't looking for it. I only meant to find a receipt, something small, buried in the drawer of my desk. But when I pulled it open, the papers inside shifted, and an unfamiliar envelope slid to the front. My breath caught. The paper was thick, official, my name stamped on the corner. I tore it open. Inside lay a document I recognized too well, a power of attorney. My supposed signature sprawled at the bottom, bold and black. But it wasn't mine. The strokes were clumsy imitations, an extra curl in the M, a hesitation in the W. To anyone else, it might look convincing. To me, it was a stranger's hand pretending to be my own. My fingers went cold. I held the sheet up, the paper trembling in my grasp. The ink seemed to shimmer under the lamp, mocking me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My heart thudded so loud, I could hear it in my ears. They forged me. They took my name. They took my hand. And now they want to take my life. I pressed the page flat against the desk, my palm sweating onto the fibers. I could almost feel the weight of betrayal soaked into it, heavier than the paper itself. The clock ticked in the silence, every second dragging me deeper into the truth. I thought of Daniel's sharp eyes, Rachel's fake smile, Michael's impatient sighs. I thought of their promises, their laughter as children, the way I once believed them. A sound escaped me, a dry, broken laugh. "You can forge my signature," I whispered into the empty room, "but you will never forge my soul." I sat there for a long time, staring at the page. Part of me wanted to collapse, to cry until nothing was left. But another part, fiercer, sharper, rose instead. I had spent decades bending, breaking, sacrificing. But this was war. My hand moved almost on its own, reaching for the phone. My voice, when it came, was steadier than I expected. That night, under the hum of the ceiling light, I dialed a number given to me weeks earlier by a neighbor. "James Carter, attorney at law," a young man's voice answered. I swallowed, gripping the forged document so tight the edges cut my skin. "Mr. Carter," I said, my voice low but firm, "this is Margaret Wilson. I believe my children have declared war on me, and I am ready to fight back." The house that once felt like a prison suddenly turned into a war room. My dining table disappeared beneath piles of paper bank statements, receipts, old notebooks, even blurry stills from the porch camera James had retrieved for me. "Every page matters," James said, leaning over the table, his pen tapping against the margins. "Every date, every number, each is a weapon." I nodded, though my hands trembled as I tried to smooth the crumpled bills into neat stacks. I had never thought of my life's paperwork as anything more than clutter. Now, it was armor. Proof that I had lived carefully, responsibly, truthfully. The sound of the printer whirred in the corner, spitting out more evidence. It felt like sharpening blades. Friends and neighbors flowed in and out of the house. Helen arrived with soup, setting the steaming pot on the counter. Mrs. Chen carried a basket of biscuits. "You need strength," Helen said, pressing a spoon into my hand. I tried to joke, though my voice cracked. "Strength from carrots and potatoes?" She smiled, but her eyes were fierce. "Strength from knowing we're with you." Each visitor left a note on the fridge, little slips of paper scrawled with encouragement. "You are not alone. You are stronger than you think. Truth will stand." For the first time in years, my walls didn't echo with silence. They echoed with support. One evening, James stood me before the mirror in my bedroom. The lamp cast a yellow glow on my tired face. "Say it," he instructed. "Say what happened in your own words." My reflection stared back at me. A woman with thinning hair, shoulders bent, lips trembling. I opened my mouth. "My children claim I cannot care for myself." The words fell weak, my voice barely above a whisper. "Again," James said gently. I tried once more. The sound cracked. My throat burned. I clenched the edge of the dresser, knuckles white. Memories crashed over me. Decades of keeping silent, of swallowing insults, of giving without question. I straightened my back, looked into my own eyes. This time, the words came clearer. "I have lived alone for 20 years. I pay my bills. I cook my meals. I am not incapable. I am not insane." James smiled. "Better?" Again. We practiced for hours, my voice growing steadier, stronger, until even I could hear the change. By the end of the night, I didn't sound like a victim rehearsing. I sounded like a witness demanding to be heard. When the house emptied and I was alone again, I replayed my own voice in my head. Stronger, clearer. I sat at the table, pen in hand, scribbling reminders on sticky notes. "Don't look down. Speak slow. Breathe." My eyes drifted to the safe in the corner, the same safe I had once shut with trembling hands. I realized that preparing for court felt exactly like sharpening a blade before battle. Each document was a whetstone stroke, each rehearsal another polish on steel. I thought of the past, how many times I had stayed quiet to keep the peace. How many times I had told myself, "Endure, Margaret, endure, for their sake." But this time, silence would not save me. This time, silence would kill me. The night before the hearing, I stood once more before the mirror. I was still the same woman. Wrinkles, scars, the faded wedding ring on my finger. But there was something new in my eyes, a fire I thought I had lost decades ago. I whispered to my reflection, and to every ghost of the past that had kept me quiet, "I will not walk into that courtroom as a frail old woman begging for mercy. I will walk in as a human being demanding the truth." The courthouse smelled of varnished wood and old paper. White light poured from the ceiling in a cold, unwavering grid, bleaching the color from everything it touched: the benches, the flags, the faces. Shoes struck the hallway like metronomes as people hurried past in suits and stiff collars. When I stepped into Department 3, the chill deepened. The judge's bench rose above us, dark as a cliff. The clerk shuffled files. A bailiff cleared his throat. Somewhere behind me, a wristwatch ticked, too loud for such a small machine. I sat at the respondent's table beside James Carter. He set a legal pad before me, his handwriting crisp, a short ladder of prompts I had practiced until the words felt carved into my bones. Answer only the question. Breathe. Look up. Tell the truth. I nodded, palms flat on the polished oak. Across the aisle, my children arranged themselves in a tableau that would have looked loving from a distance. Daniel near the front, jaw set, Rachel smoothing a creaseless skirt. Michael avoiding my eyes, his fingers worrying the cap of a pen. Their attorney, a tall man with hair like wet ink, leaned toward them with a practiced smile. I could not feel my feet. I could feel everything else. The clerk called the case. Petition for guardianship on the basis of diminished capacity. In re Margaret Wilson. The words rose into the rafters and hung there like smoke. From where I sat, I could see the grain of the wood on the witness stand, the small chips on the edge of the rail, the gavel's round head resting idle but near at hand. The judge, robe immaculate, lifted her eyes and surveyed us with the impersonal patience of someone who has watched entire lives get measured out in affidavits and exhibits. "Counsel," she said to the petitioner's table, "you may proceed." The other attorney stood with theatrical simplicity, buttoning his jacket as if stringing a bow. "Your Honor," he began, voice smooth as pane glass, "this is a case about compassion. About children who have watched their mothers decline with heartbreak and who now seek only to protect her." He gestured toward me without looking. "Over the last year, Ms. C. Estime, Wilson has exhibited increasing confusion, paranoia, and poor financial judgment. Her neighbors report erratic behavior. Our petition is not punitive. It is protective." His words were bricks, and he laid them carefully, one after another, building a wall so clean and straight, the eye almost wanted to trust it. "Thank you," the judge said. "Call your first witness." They called a former neighbor first, a woman I barely knew. She took the oath, sat, and folded her hands in her lap like a child in a photograph. "Did you observe concerns with Mrs. Wilson's memory?" the attorney asked. "I did," she said, eyes flicking toward my children. On several occasions, she repeated the same questions to me at the mailbox. "Dates?" She hesitated, then said, "Around early March, last year." James's pen moved once on his pad. I read the word he wrote, and felt something loosen in my chest. Hospital. They called a grocery clerk next, who described me leaving without paying one afternoon, my vacant look, my confusion, his voice careful, rehearsed. They produced a cousin from a branch of the family that only appears for weddings and wills. He said I had outbursts, that I fixated on receipts. The attorney's cadence never faltered. Compassion, confusion, protection. The words repeated until they blurred like the courthouse lights. When he sat, the judge nodded to James. "Cross, counsel?" James rose, adjusting nothing. He walked to the lectern with the patience of a man threading a needle in a moving train. "To the neighbor," he said gently. "You testified, Ms. Sumber. Wilson asked you the same question at the mailbox in early March, correct?" She nodded. "Would March 4th sound right?" "I think so." James slid a paper from his folder and handed it to the clerk, who passed it up. "Hospital admission records," he said, turning back to the witness. "Ms. Wilson was under anesthesia on March 4th and remained inpatient until March 7th. Is it possible your dates are mistaken?" The woman's lips parted. Her certainty deflated like a lung. "I suppose it's possible." No further questions. To the grocery clerk, James asked for the store's video policy. "You record the front registers?" "Yes." "Retain footage?" "For 90 days." "And this alleged incident occurred 11 months ago?" "Yes." "So you cannot produce footage?" "No." "Do you know that Ms. C.C. Form C. Wilson has automatic payments set for that grocer?" James produced a printed ledger from my bank. "Would you read the entries for that week?" The clerk read, eyes narrowing, then looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. "There's a charge." And another. "Thank you." No further questions. To the cousin, James offered no paper. Only this. "When did you last visit my client's home?" The man blinked. "I'm not sure." "Would 3 Thanksgivings ago refresh your recollection?" "I, perhaps." "So you are not a frequent observer of her daily life?" "No." James returned to our table. He did not smile. He did not have to. Respondent's case, the judge said. James stood. We call Dr. Patel. A small woman with steady eyes took the stand. Board-certified geriatrician, her CV short but dense. James kept it plain. Doctor, have you evaluated Ms. Wilson? Yes. Cognitive screening, labs, review of medication interactions. Findings. She is oriented to person, place, time, and situation. Her memory is consistent with normal aging. There is no clinical basis for a conclusion of diminished capacity. Thank you. Anything else you wish the court to know? Dr. Patel glanced at me, and then at the judge. Ms. Wilson manages her medication accurately. She understood my consent forms better than many 40-year-olds I see. No theatrics. Just stone set on stone. Next, James called Mr. Rister. Alvarez the locksmith, with hands like old rope. He took the oath with a nod that creased his entire face. Mr. Alvarez, James asked, did you perform work at Mrs. Wilson's home on April 12th? 2 new deadbolts, he said. She watched, asked smart questions about the strike plates, paid by check, wrote the date right the first time. James held up a copy of the invoice. Is that her signature? Sure is. I watched her sign. Steady hand. And this is 2 days after the petitioner's claim she left her front door unlocked overnight with the oven on? Mr. Alvarez snorted. Her smoke detector chirped because the battery was low. Oven was cold. And she double-checked those locks twice, same as I would if I lived alone. A ripple went through the gallery. Quiet, but there. Finally, Helen. She walked with her cane as if it were a staff. When she turned and faced the courtroom, I saw the woman who had folded me into a hug when my husband left. The friend who had put soup in my hands when my children placed summonses in my mailbox. Ms. Brooks, James said. How long have you known Ms. Wilson? 51 years. And in that time, do you have reason to doubt her clarity? She looked at me, then back at the judge. Your Honor, Margaret has more sense in her little finger than most folks have in their whole body. She keeps a notebook, every call, every bill. People call that obsession. I call it survival. Thank you. The other attorney declined to cross her. Perhaps he read in the judge's face what I saw. Some truths do not take kindly to being handled. Throughout the testimony, Daniel kept his eyes on the table, his expression fixed in the mask of the dutiful son doing a difficult duty. Rachel watched me with a mixture of impatience and something like pity performed for the court. But when Michael took the stand for their side, called to describe incidents of confusion, my breath thinned to a wire. He would not meet my gaze. He spoke of a phone call where I forgot our conversation. He said, I accused him of theft. He described me as paranoid. Each word struck like the edge of a paper. Small cuts, clean but deep. I watched his jaw work, saw the tiny tremor that betrays a man lying to preserve a story he's already sold himself. When James rose for cross, he held only one sheet of paper. Mr. Wilson, you're referring to a call on September 18th. I think so. James set the sheet on the rail. Phone records show you called your mother 3 times that day requesting money. She declined. At 7:42 p.m., you texted, if you don't send it, I'll make sure you never touch your accounts again. Did you write that? Michael's mouth opened. Closed. I was angry. Anger doesn't make threats true, James said softly. Michael's shoulders rounded. For a moment, he looked 14 again, the year he wept into my apron after breaking a neighbor's window. He had told me then, it was an accident, Mom. Please believe me. I had believed him. Today, he did not ask. They rested. James touched my sleeve. Ready? I stood. The room seemed to tilt, then right itself around me. The oath warmed my tongue like tea on a winter morning. He guided me with questions I knew were coming, but the answers still trembled until they did not. I spoke about my days, Groceries, medication boxes laid out on Sundays, bills balanced, meals cooked, the lock double-checked, the porch light switched off at 10. He asked about numbers. I gave them. He asked about dates. I saw them printed in my notebook's neat lines. Then he stepped back. Ms. Wilson, is there anything you wish to say to the court? The judge looked at me. Silence gathered. I turned to her, to the rows of wood and light, to the 3 children I had carried inside my own body, and I let the words come the way we had practiced in the mirror, not as a plea, but as a vow. I am 78 years old, I said. I am not as fast as I was, and I do not lift what I once could. But weakness is not the same as incapacity. I remember every dollar I earned, and every night I worked to earn it. I remember the hospital corridors and the bleach on my hands. I remember mortgage papers and tuition checks, and the day my youngest learned to tie his shoes. I have lived alone for years. I pay my bills. I cook my meals. I lock my doors. I sign my name, and I know my name. Today I am called confused. The only thing I am confused about is how love that was fed for decades has been starved to bone in a single year. I do not ask my children to be perfect. I ask them to be truthful. I do not ask this court for mercy. I ask for recognition. I am old, yes. I am still a person, and I choose my own life. My voice did not break. My hands did not shake. In that box of light, I felt taller than I had in 20 years. James lifted a final folder. Your Honor, Respondents Exhibit 19. Inside, the forged power of attorney I had found. Its counterfeit curls and hesitations sat beside authenticated samples of my real signature gathered over decades. The locksmith invoice, the pharmacy log, the hospital consent, the grocery club application from 12 years ago. A forensic examiner's brief report was clipped on top, stark with its conclusion. Inconsistent with known exemplars. Probable forgery. Double one, bubble one, petitioners. The judge asked, turning to my children's attorney, do you wish to be heard on Exhibit 19? He stood, mouth a hard line. We object to foundation. Overruled, she said. The examiner's declaration and the corroborating documents are sufficient for admission. The weight I assign them is another matter. James did not gloat. He placed the folder down, as if setting a stone at the corner of a foundation he trusted. The judge leaned back, robe a dark fold of mountain. She removed her glasses, cleaned them with a linen square that seemed to draw time longer than seconds allow. When she replaced them, her gaze was colder, clearer. This court has heard conflicting testimony, she began. It has weighed credibility and documentary evidence. The petitioners have presented statements that, on scrutiny, are undermined by records and recollection. The respondent has presented medical evaluation, corroborated daily functioning, and evidence suggesting at least one document proffered by petitioners was forged. The law does not require perfection from those who wish to control their own lives. It requires capacity. Ms. Wilson possesses it. She lifted the gavel. The petition for guardianship is denied. The court further finds no present basis to restrict Ms. Zero Wilson's financial authority. Any instruments purporting to grant power of attorney not freely executed by Ms. Sane II Wilson are void. The gavel fell one clean strike, and a sound ran through me like a bell struck inside my bones. Rachel exhaled a curse under her breath. Daniel stared at the table as if the wood had betrayed him. Michael looked up at me at last, and in his eyes flickered something I could not name. Anger, shame, the first hairline crack in a story told too long. James touched my shoulder, a quiet anchor in the sudden tide of noise, people rising, benches scraping, the bailiff calling the next case. My throat loosened. I had expected to weep. I did not. My eyes prickled, but what gathered there was not grief. It was relief, salted with a pride so unfamiliar, I hardly recognized it as mine. We stepped into the hallway, where the air smelled like dust and sunlight. The long window at the end of the corridor threw a yellow square onto the floor. I stood in it, let the warmth find my wrists, my face, the hollow above my collarbone. The weight slipped from me in sections, shoulders first, then the ribs, then finally the hands that had clenched for months. Helen was waiting on the bench, her cane propped beside her, a paper cup of coffee cooling between her palms. When she saw my face, she didn't ask. She set the cup down, rose, and folded me into her arms. I felt the bird-bone strength of her, and knew I had never been as alone as I had feared. "Home?" James asked. "Yes," I said. My voice surprised me, low, calm, the steady register of a woman not pleading, not performing, simply existing in the clean air after a long storm. "Home." As we walked beneath the rigid white lights, I thought of the sentence I had spoken on that stand, and of another I had been carrying, unvoiced, for years. It rose now, gentle and fierce, and settled in my chest like a standard planted in new ground. I did not come here to be saved. I came here to be seen. Outside, the sky was the smartest blue I had ever noticed, and somewhere, far away, a bell was ringing noon. When the courthouse doors closed behind me, the noise dissolved as though someone had pulled a plug. No gavel, no murmurs, no shuffling shoes, only the sound of my own breath, thin and raspy, echoing inside my chest. By the time I reached home, the sun had already dipped. Shadows stretched across the living room, long and strange, as if the house itself didn't recognize me anymore. I set my bag on the floor and sat in the armchair. The same armchair where I had once dozed after night shifts, shoes still on, exhaustion dripping from every pore. The room was silent. No papers scattered across the table. No neighbors fussing with notes of encouragement. No lawyer flipping through files. Just silence. I whispered into it, almost afraid to break it. I won. But, do I have anything left to celebrate? The words vanished into the air without an answer. Relief should feel light. But that night, it pressed heavier than the summons had months ago. The court had given me back my freedom, my house, my name. Yet, as I sat alone, the truth rose sharp. My children were gone. Not just absent, but absent by choice. I thought of Daniel's downcast eyes, Rachel's clenched jaw, Michael's trembling voice on the stand. Even in their lies, I had searched for a flicker of love, a stray signal that they remembered I was their mother. But when the gavel fell, it was not just their petition that died, it was the fragile hope I had carried like a secret talisman, that one day they would turn back. That night, my body refused sleep. I lay on the bed, eyes wide in the dark, while tears slid silently across my temples and into my hair. I cried without sound, as if even grief had grown tired of raising its voice. The clock ticked past midnight. My chest ached from holding everything inside. I whispered questions to the ceiling, as if it could answer. Is this what freedom feels like? Winning without joy? St. What kind of mother defeats her children in court? Jasus, have I saved my life only to bury my family? The ceiling stared back, blank and white, offering no absolution. Toward dawn, I rose. My joints protested, but I shuffled into the kitchen. I filled the kettle, struck the switch, and listened as the water began to hum. That hum so ordinary, so gentle felt like the first sound in hours that did not accuse me. I poured the tea into a chipped mug, wrapped both hands around it, and carried it to the window. The sky outside was pale, streaked with the first veins of pink. Birds stirred on the telephone wires. I opened the window, just a crack. Cool air slipped in, brushing my cheeks. I sipped slowly. The bitterness of the tea grounded me, warm against my tongue. A tiny act, but it felt like staking a flag into the soil of my new life. Proof that I was still here, still capable of beginning again. As the morning light crept further in, it touched the scratched wedding ring still circling my finger. Once, It had been a chain binding me to years of sacrifice. In the courtroom, it had gleamed like a relic of proof. Now, in the quiet of my own home, it seemed neither chain nor relic. It was simply mind-scarred, enduring, unbroken. I lifted my hand, studied the ring, and for the first time did not feel foolish for keeping it. I felt steady. I know the pain will not vanish with one ruling, one sunrise. The ache of betrayal will walk beside me for many nights more. But as I stood by the open window, tea cooling in my hands, I realized pain was no longer my jailer. I had faced the storm. I had survived the trial. And though I came home to silence, silence no longer frightened me. That morning, as the first bird called from the wires, I whispered to myself, I may have lost my children, but I did not lose myself. And for now, that is enough. The first morning in my new apartment, I woke before dawn. No summons under the door, no papers stacked on the table, no silence weighed down by shame. Only the sound of the city breathing outside, bicycles rattling past, a vendor calling to open her stall. I padded barefoot across the cool wooden floor. The window faced east, and when I opened it, the wind rushed in carrying the scent of bread from the bakery downstairs. I held a cup of coffee in both hands, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: lightness. Once, the phone in my hand had felt as heavy as a stone, dragging me down with unanswered calls and cold voices. Now, this cup of coffee weighed almost nothing, and yet it held my entire freedom. A few months after the trial, I sold the old house. It no longer felt like mine. It had become a battlefield, its walls soaked in betrayal. I took the money and booked a one-way ticket. Italy first, then France. In Florence, I stood before Botticelli's Primavera and realized I had spent decades painting everyone else's lives while leaving my own canvas blank. So, I bought a set of brushes. In Paris, I walked along the Seine and joined a group of women my age sketching bridges. My lines were clumsy, but they were mine. I took yoga classes in a sunlit studio where my bones creaked, but my laughter surprised even me. I volunteered at an orphanage, tying shoelaces, reading stories aloud. One boy slipped his small hand into mine, warm and trusting, and I thought, I am still a mother, even if not to those who share my blood. I remember nights when I sat on that sagging brown sofa, waiting for the phone to ring, praying one of my children would call to ask how I was, not what I could give. Now, I sit on a wooden chair by a balcony that overlooks the sea. No one calls, and that absence no longer feels like punishment. It feels like space, space I can fill with music, paint, or silence, whichever I choose. Once, the scratched wedding ring on my finger mocked me, a reminder of promises broken. Now, I still wear it, not as a chain, but as a medal. It speaks not of what was lost, but of what endured, me. I no longer write long speeches in my head. Life itself speaks plainly enough. When I water the potted geraniums on my balcony, I whisper to them the truth I have learned. Sacrifice does not guarantee love. Silence does not guarantee peace. And self-respect, once surrendered, is almost impossible to win back. But not entirely. I don't need to tell this as a lesson. I simply live it. Each brushstroke on my canvas, each stretch in yoga, each laugh shared with strangers, turned friends, all of it is proof. One morning, months later, I stood at the edge of a small French harbor. Boats rocked gently, their ropes creaking, gulls diving in arcs against the sky. The phone I once clutched like a lifeline was at home on the dresser, forgotten. I lifted my coffee cup, warm against the chill breeze, and watched the sun break over the water. I whispered to the sea, to the sky, to myself, I am no longer waiting for anyone to arrive. I am the one who opens the door to my own life. Thank you for walking with me all the way to the end. My name is Margaret Wilson, 78 years old, a mother who once withered slowly under the indifference of her own 3 children, but who chose, at last, to stand. I want to look at you, the one holding these words. If one day, the very people you love most turn their backs and leave you in your darkest hour, what will you do? Will you stay silent, shrinking smaller and smaller until you disappear? Or will you rise, even trembling, to claim the life that still belongs to you? If my story touched you, I invite you to leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, your feelings, or your own story. Somewhere out there, another person may be sitting in the same silence I once knew, wondering if they have the courage to draw a boundary. Your voice could be the hand that helps them. And if you believe more people should hear stories like this, real journeys of loss, survival, and reclaiming dignity, please share this piece. You never know whose heart it might reach. I tell a new story every week. Each one carries the scars of betrayal, but also the seeds of renewal. If you would like to walk with me further, follow along. Let us build a small circle where truth is spoken plainly, where freedom is not a gift granted by others, but a door we open ourselves. I have lived long enough to know that applause fades, children leave, and promises break. But I have also learned this. When you begin to honor yourself, the air tastes different. Even silence feels kinder. So I close with this truth. The one I earned through years of pain and a single moment of courage. I am no longer the shadow in someone else's house. I am the one holding the key, and I have opened the door to my own freedom. SSDS.